Hello, everyone, and welcome back to FutureBuilt. I'm Matt Boney, your host. I'm here today with Alex Burkett, who is the general manager at Greyson Capital Group. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm excited to dive in.
Thanks, Matt. I'm really excited as well.
Awesome. So let's start off. Maybe give us a little bit of background on yourself, and then obviously touch on Greyson and what you guys are up to.
Yeah, I'll give kind of a quick history here, but got my start in the outdoor hospitality space when I was actually 16 years old. It was my first summer job, something that was a little bit more fun than fast food. And but funny enough, I'd never been camping before, never knew anything about hospitality, like beyond beach vacations and stuff that we would go to growing up. But really fell in love with the space and have since stuck with it. So I've had the opportunity to work for some great companies, GMing properties. Feels like a little bit all over New York, North Carolina, Ohio, where I grew up, and then now here in Michigan. So today with Greyson Capital Group, which really started as a multifamily apartment company who's branched into the outdoor hospitality space, I manage our RV resort between Grand Rapids and Lansing here in Michigan. It's our one property now, but continuing to grow and expand and add more properties down the line.
Super exciting. That's awesome, man. How's everything going with the current build?
Yeah, it's been fun, and especially before I took over at this park, we did a little bit of an expansion here, and that was it's always a fun process when you have to go through that. So, added a bunch of brand new concrete RV sites, so really that kind of higher end side of the camping business. Lots of new amenities and just kind of building that out. But this is really a year of growth after I think some normalization in the outdoor hospitality space. So really exciting. We're pacing quite well for this upcoming season, and yeah, should be a really fun summer coming up here in April, which I'll be around the corner before we know it. I know with snowy weather here in Michigan, I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Maybe talk to us a little bit about this. I just read, as I mentioned, a blog post that you had published talking about, amenitizing properties, but being smart about that. Um, Talk to us about how owners can think about attracting the right market segment through this concept of not trying to be for everyone.
Yeah, so this was that piece is from a presentation that I gave at the Outdoor Hospitality Conference and Expo, which is
Okay.
the national show in Louisville, Kentucky, towards the end of the year. And really, it's a cadre of thousands of different park owners from across the country, and we're all kind of in different markets, experiencing different challenges, all doing different things. And what I really wanted to focus on, and this is largely from a lot of my experience, is kind of that it's that one-upping mentality, right? And
Mhm.
so many times we can try and pack way too much into a given property or try and think, well, because the park owner down the road has, a given thing, well, I should have it too. Or I think the same principle applies more broadly to hotels and short-term rental accommodations, as well as the outdoor hospitality business that I'm in. And it comes from the book Blue Ocean Strategy, which is kind of that red ocean, blue ocean type of concept, right? Of are you swimming in a sea of a red ocean where everybody's moving in the same direction, right? It's kind of that like mindless zombies, and you've probably seen memes similar to that too. But I think it's boils down to that simply kind of quality over quantity is
Mhm.
right, something we've all heard and talked about. And so a classic example for us, right? We're a very family friendly, RV park and resort. I've got another buddy, Matt, that I was telling you about before the show, who also named Matt coincidentally. He has some really unique properties in the Catskills in New York
Okay.
that are these really primitive, rustic tent sites and these really cool RV sites and things like that. He really is playing into the on-site dining and the wellness trend, right? And getting romantic couples and things like that to come to his, type of stay. Or meanwhile, I'm trying to get the mom and dad who have two kids who want to buy, all kinds of stuff and go play on the jump pad in the playground and do all the fun kid family things. So, right, it's two very different markets. Where both, it would not make sense for him to put in a jump pad
Yeah.
at that park, right? Would you like your fiance to go and do that? Like, probably not. It's not exactly ideal, but you know, it's simple in concept. But I think so often we just look at, well, so and so did this, so I need to do that to keep up, rather than kind of working backwards, starting with your audience, starting with what's going to make sense for your property, and then just kind of working backwards from there to generate, well, what do I need to have in order for that type of stay and experience to be successful?
Absolutely. And I mean, thinking about those sort of market segments, are you guys looking at particular market segments as you think about expansion that are growing faster than others? Like, is family a segment that maybe has more speed to it than wellness, or is there underlying trends there?
I think there's a little bit of both. Particularly for us, being that we're between two great major metros, right here of Grand Rapids and Lansing. We're about 30 to 40 minutes from each of those, so we can pull a lot of people from various backgrounds into that. As we're continuing to look to expand, we're really focused on the unique stay side of that, which I think does lend itself well to a lot of different demographics, right? Families, couples. We obviously have a lot of people that are 65 plus that RV in really nice
Oh,
rigs and that are kind of more on that retiree side of the equation. So I think number one, we have to make those experiences for everyone. And number two, right, even on the unit side, we have some rustic cabin units and some, lodging on property now. We're looking at things like covered wagons or yurts or
oh,
tree
cool.
houses, right? What are really unique experiences that you think about, man, like you could stay in a covered wagon in Michigan, like that's a little weird. I know you said you're in Wyoming, like that's a Wyoming type of thing that I think of more than I think of it as a Michigan thing. But what a cool experience, right? Who wouldn't want to take whoever, your significant other, your family, to stay in something like that? So for us, I think it's about doing something unique, and that's not kind of around here. We have another resort style park that's not far from us, other state parks and state rec areas, other campgrounds, all within 20-25 miles of us, right? So I think when you think about that, you have to really find ways to stand out, and that unique stay piece, something that's very Instagrammable, that's very, unique and interesting. Those are the type of things that we really think will play well into the long-term future of the property, because it's hard to replicate, right? You put something like that in, or you add a really unique amenity into the space too. That can be something that, if your property has great service and great deliverables, something that can really set you apart. So that's really where we focus.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then when we see that across, I mean, all sorts of different locations, trying to find something unique and stay ahead of the curve, while still having it provide actual tangible value to the end user or the
Yes.
guest. Where do you guys source these structures, or like how does that process work when you think about building out future parks?
Yeah, it's really unique, and obviously at some of these conferences and events that I've gotten to attend in person, you meet a wide variety of people, and there's great setups a lot of times of these units that you can walk through. There's also folks, right, that I've been able to, in our owner Justin, he's been able to tour, the factories of some of these places too, see how it's built, kind of work on putting that together. But for me, I really want to tangibly experience it and go and try and walk it and see it. But for example, that covered wagon vendor, there's a couple of them in our space that present at conferences every year, and it's really fascinating to walk through them and see what new innovations look like in that space. So yeah, especially I think with the units and even the amenities sometimes, like you want to try and get in and experience
Yeah,
what it's going to be like as a guest and whether or not that's truly going to fit into the property. And I think that's the fun part is, although there's some ideas like that we've found, we haven't narrowed it in, right? And I think as we continue to still grow and build out what this property was, when we took this over, the property was making, 250,000 a year, not having many customers, right? We're on a much different growth path and trajectory now. There's a whole new set of customers that are coming into the play that I think you sometimes have to let, your guests tell you what they want in
yeah,
some ways and respond accordingly. And then, as I said, add those type of things that are going to deliver on that better experience. So I think that's the fun part as we continue to go to these shows and things. I think our guests will tell us what they're looking for, and I'll get to tour all the cool stuff and hopefully find something that'll work.
absolutely. That's super cool. And I think you're totally right. I mean, seeing something in person, touching the actual walls, experiencing whatever it is, it can't be replicated. It can't be beat. What maybe talk to us a little bit about the underlying economics of these locations. In as much detail as you want to, but
hmm
what are some of the metrics you're targeting? What are you guys really tracking? What makes something successful?
Yeah, it's a really good and complex question, and I'll try and touch on some large themes in that. So I'd say obviously, most people in any sort of hospitality business, you're looking at things like what is your occupancy, what is your ADR, your average daily rate, what is the right site mix that you have. So for us, that's a mix of different types of RV sites, tent sites, cabin units, right? And trying to those are all largely different segments, right? Somebody who's staying in a cabin isn't necessarily going to necessarily stay in an RV site. And obviously coming out of last year, the industry as a whole, if we look across the board, was fairly flat in
Yeah.
terms of growth. And it really was kind of this push towards raising rates, moving that ADR up, and a lot of us saw occupancy drop, us included to some degree, where we were getting more money per night for those given sites, but we weren't necessarily as full. So that can have a variety of impacts on things like, what other types of revenue are you generating? So if you look at a given campground, you might think about the price that you're going to pay for that night to stay in the spot. Well, there's all sorts of other things like, are you going to buy ice cream or food? We have a bar on property, so getting drinks, firewood, ice, all kinds of other things that you have to kind of factor into that. If your park is not as full, you're, not going to get as much ancillary revenue income in those other areas. But usually there's a given cost to build a certain RV site. Most of the time, it's averaging somewhere between 20 to 25,000. I'd say is a healthy kind of cost to from infrastructure to material costs to everything that goes into it. Get that site up and running. It's really just about kind of finding, okay, are you building correctly? Are you operating correctly? And there's usually
Mhm.
that break even point for that given site of how much you need to generate in cash every year to cover the basic operations. And then obviously it's kind of what do you need to be priced at to hit whatever, profit or net operating income target you have. So
And is that per pad, like per parked location, or is
typically,
that
yes, and
okay?
and you're
Okay,
you're usually looking
interesting.
at like what is your revenue per site, right? Or
Okay,
what we
yeah,
call kind of a rev par or a rev pass, so revenue per available site. Most people are
okay,
familiar probably with rev par from the hotel
yeah,
world, but yeah, there's generally that number
got
associated with it that you're trying to kind of move forward and identify what that looks like. It's a little bit different, we're more of that resort style model park, so there's a little bit more staffing involved. I kind of listed, a number of different departments and things that we have. Well, obviously having a bar and food and all these other things, I'm going to have more labor, I'm going to have more costs associated with it, but my guests are going to spend more money because we're a nicer property with all of these types of things. Our Red Pass number is going to look a little bit different than, let's say, a traditional RV park that has, long-term residents, or
hmm
if people are familiar with a mobile home park, right? Or something that's more of like housing, where you have people that are staying for a very long period of time, versus most of our people are staying for a weekend, right? So it's a different set of economics that come with that. And there's not one wrong way or another. You just have to kind of know which one you're running and try and run it accordingly.
absolutely. Have there been certain pitfalls with this model that you guys have had to pivot around in the past? Like, what's if you want to share a horror story, has anything gone wrong?
Yeah, I'd say I don't necessarily know that there's been something horrible that's gone wrong, but to my
Yeah.
point about the ancillary income fluctuations, right? Coming into last year and having occupancy be flatter than we were expecting, right? You
Mhm.
you see that impact in all the other areas of spending, right? So people are spending less at my bar,
Mhm.
less on food service, less on retail merch, and all the other things that go into it. Well, I'm still having staff that are running those things. So it starts to flip the, I'm not generating the type of revenue that I was expecting. I'm still having a very similar level of cost associated with doing those things. So it can just make the operation a lot tighter to run, and it's a lot harder to kind of figure out where else you need to cut or what adjustments you need to make. How do you move pricing? There's a lot of time that I spend and, people in our industry spend on revenue management. Earlier today, I was on a revenue management call with our, point of sale system, looking at ways in which we can begin to, make those adjustments and improvements. So
Mhm.
that in itself is kind of, it's a game of Tetris sometimes to figure out, well, what do I need to do to rates? What do I need to do to occupancy? Because those are really my levers that I'm trying to pull to run that. And then how do I reflect that in my staffing and the way that I run
Yeah,
the park as well? So it's a complex game for sure.
absolutely. I always think about sort of that conundrum of like the CAC to LTV ratio, at least
Mm,
in startup land where we
yes.
calculate these things. And when I was listening to I think it was Alex Hormozy who was talking about you can only reduce CAC to zero, but you can infinitely increase LTV. And
Yes.
so that's one thing that we're big on with Infinite anyway, is just how do we continuously increase LTV, especially once you think about, okay, this is a captive guest, they're on property, they're already here. How can we add actual value and try to drive that number up to justify these higher ADRs, or in this case, per available spot, right? Per available spot. Super interesting. Are there any strategies you've used in this last year that outperformed others?
Yeah, and it's a really good. I'm glad you brought that up because for us, we've really focused on that segment as well, and we have a lot of folks that are those repeat and return customers that come year
Hmm.
after year, incorporating really good discount strategies that reward loyalty. And trying to
Okay.
get somebody that's either going to add on, let's say, a Thursday or a Monday. Um,
Mhm.
Night to that normal weekend booking of a Friday through Sunday, which is kind of a normal checkout. Reservations in our industry normally average 2 to 2.1, 2.2 nights. So anything I can do to get that third or fourth
Yeah.
night and reward that person who they're already on site, they're already staying with us, they're already enjoying themselves, stay that extra night, even if I have to
Yeah.
give it to them for $30 or so, some really low rate. Well,
Hmm.
it's better than it going to zero and them checking
Yeah.
out and I have nobody staying on that site tomorrow. And if
Yeah.
they're here another day, they're likely going to buy lunch and they might get some ice cream and all the other things that because of the style in which we operate, it's a trickle down effect that if they're here, especially if they're paying less for the site itself, they're going to spend more on everything else that's here. And that's the stuff that is really good margin, right?
Mhm.
Ice cream's 70%
Yeah.
margin sometimes. So, all of those type of things and trying to figure out we have a captive guest, they've stayed for a weekend. How can we get them to come back for another weekend in the same year or make that weekend stay longer? Those types of things have been very successful for us and something that we continue to kind of hone in on.
Super cool. Yeah. I mean, I think it's this value stack, right? That you got to look at holistically and say, okay, well, the available spot revenue is maybe that, I don't know what percentage of the stay that
Hmm.
actually accounts for, but maybe let's just call it 70%.
Right.
Um, there's the traditional thinking for the other 30%, but then how can you add another 10% on top and on top of that and on top of that? So
Hmm.
super cool that you guys are thinking about that. It's obviously paying off and continuing to expand. So that's fantastic. When you think about these future locations, is it all, RV focused, or are you dabbling in, we're in the modular world. Are you guys dabbling in fixed structures or semi-permanent? Like, how does that look for you?
Yeah, also really, really good question. I would say we have a thesis and a focus around one trying to go and look at Michigan as a market that we think number one there are a lot of campgrounds that are here,
Yep.
and looking at the industry, there's a lot of parks in the United States were built in the 1970s into the 1980s. And so you think about when that is, there's a lot of owners that are getting to the point of being 65, 70 years old, ready to retire, may not have kids or family in the business that wants to continue with that property. And so there are a lot of really good
Wow.
properties beginning to that have hit the market in the last several years and that will continue to hit the market over the next, 5 years or so. We
Hmm.
think. So number one being that Michigan has a lot
Cool.
of parks, we think there's a lot of those opportunities on the board in really great locations. We love to either be on water or near water. So we have a nice fishing lake on the property now. This
Nice.
property has 100 acres, so we like the
Wow.
expansion potential. Whether we
Yeah.
fully use it or not, we always like that as a good asset, right? You can do a covered land play if nothing else, where at least the land has some amount of value with that, and you can always let somebody else develop it later down the
Yeah.
line. So those are things that are important to us, but that unit mix piece of it, as you talked with either modular structures or whatever the unique type of lodging that we're going to put there, that is a really unique thing that doesn't exist a ton in Michigan, or at least in the markets that we're looking at.
Cool.
So it'd be really interesting. We're very much, at least at current capacity, we're a little over 160 sites in total. That would be on the RV and tent side. We've only got 10 cabin units. So if you look at that ratio, we're
Yeah.
very heavy on
Right.
RV compared to lodging. Getting something that's a little bit more 25/75, 60/40, that's a little bit more interesting, especially knowing what type of rates you can get in
Yeah.
cabin stays. And if they're unique and done right and use a lot of the same type of principles we've talked about on, this podcast already, we think that that's a really exciting opportunity. So I would venture to guess, obviously not knowing what particular property, but should we either buy properties or acquire them with a given mix, we would want to go in and add lodging to a property if it, let's say, was fairly low on the lodging side. And I think that that's really where a lot of the opportunity is to make the RV sites nice, obviously do the value adds and add-ons to it. But I think that addition of lodging in some form or fashion in a really unique way and cost-effective
Mhm.
way, I think is really
Yeah.
key. So yeah, it's something we're really excited about.
Super cool. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think about this also from the market standpoint. Like, there's only so many people that kind of fit into that have an RV already, or maybe are renting one
Yes.
category. Is like, how can we, sort of spread this opportunity to more people in the market and say, hey,
Well, and it's
we
that
do have
life
this
cycle too. Somebody might
exact
start in a
true,
cabin,
yeah, and then
look
they
at an
get an RV
RV or rent one for
or
the first time
exact
and move down that line. So you're
very good point.
absolutely right.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting from that, and it can flip flop either way. I mean, someone may come in an RV and say, "Oh, wow, there's beautiful cabins here. Why don't we come back next year and just stay here and that way?" So super awesome. And how are you guys looking for these sites? I know finding land and finding these owners can sometimes be a little mysterious for most
Yeah.
folks. What are there any strategies that have been doing well for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Our owner Justin does a little bit more of this. As I mentioned,
Okay,
he comes from the multifamily side and has plenty of properties and experience in the Memphis area and all kinds of um does a lot on the real estate acquisition side. I do a little bit less of this, but I know, specifically off market deals are things that we look at as, again, a key advantage.
yeah,
Building relationships with some of these owners that we know are getting close or in locations that we want to be in, and building that seed over time that, someday, we hope to be one of those first calls, right? Where if they finally are ready, that they're
right,
going to go to us, see if there's a deal that can be made and go about that. So yeah, that's the little bit that's kind of the behind closed doors kind of stuff gets figured out. But there's some great national brokers in the industry too that specialize in campgrounds and RV parks that we get deals all the time. Like I said, specifically, we're looking for Michigan right now, but continuing to kind of build that footprint out into other states and in great markets, right? Tennessee, Kentucky, Wisconsin, those are all really unique markets and areas that we also like as well. So a lot of times it's just, finding where that information is, getting in with a broker, having those conversations. And I'd say presenting that you're a serious buyer, right, is always
yeah,
helpful, even if it's not right away, but just, hey, we bought one, let us continue to buy more and do that. So yeah, it's something that more and more deals will continue to pop up, and we just have to be ready and get them from all different types of ways and angles and be ready to take advantage of it when the time's right.
absolutely. And what's sort of top of mind for you then on the day to day? It sounds like, obviously managing this location. What else is taking up, uh, you know, brain space on the daily?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, revenue management is a piece that we're focusing pretty strongly on, along with the marketing piece. Back to the, right, trying to identify what are some of these untapped market segments that we're looking at, in really trying to, right. We have a defined focus on families. We know what we are, but we know that this property itself was only built in the early 2000s. So for a campground, that's pretty young, and it has not
Yeah,
been in the market that long. There are a lot of folks in our area that don't know much about us and just haven't been exposed to us in that market. So that's really taking up a lot of time. It's ramping up for the season, right? So I'm in full merch buying mode and hiring the team and getting ready, taking reservations. We have there's a concert series coming to our local area. If you're
cool.
familiar with, have you heard of Billy Strings before?
I
The
haven't, but I gotta
okay,
check it out.
he's an Emmy winning
Oh
like
wow,
musician and bluegrass artist, but he
amazing!
he grew up in our area and knew this property. Um, it's exploded over the last couple of days in terms of
Really,
reservations. So this is a really, yeah, the reservations is taking up a lot of my space these last couple days. But yeah, it's all the logistics and getting everything ready for the season. But certainly we think this is going to be another banner year, and all these activities from revenue management to marketing to retail optimization. Those are all the things that I'm trying to get in the nitty gritty on and figure out, as you said, how do we make those incremental improvements? We had a great year last year. What are we going to continue to do to get additional dollars on each reservation? Continue to grow the property, and should we have another great year this year, then we're on to the next property for 2027.
Awesome. Yeah. This is just such a hot topic in general, throughout any industry at the moment, but I'd love to hear your take on AI as it
Yeah.
relates to your space. Obviously, every episode we got to ask this question. um, and also, I don't know, if you know anything about the robotics space. This is also interesting to us as working with modular manufacturers. We're always
hmm
thinking about this, but do you see AI or robotics kind of playing into the space, and if so, how?
Yeah, it's definitely been a topic of hot conversation. I think most people deemed that national conference that we went to this year as like it was the conference of AI because that was what everybody was talking about.
Yeah,
And I think it is started to infiltrate what has traditionally been a very old-fashioned industry.
yeah.
Most of us,
Hmm.
when we think of camping, it is very much the
Like a
disconnecting.
clipboard or
Exactly. I'm
something.
rolling in. Somebody's going to have a clipboard there. I'm going to hand them cash. I'm going to
Yeah,
go
yeah.
to some site, out in the woods, and
Mhm.
that's going to be what it is, right?
Yeah.
That very much still exists. The industry is still largely mom and pop. Our
Mhm.
being a capital group like Greyson is still the minority. That's 20% of the industry. 70% is still just individual owners who have properties.
Yep.
Um, but I think specifically the groups like ours are going to be the ones that are leading that push. We're incorporating this into the way that we do operations, right? So we use obviously a task management system that uses Asana or that uses AI to kind of push all that forward.
Mhm.
That's something that's been really helpful on the comms side, right? Something that helps me as I'm looking at management to begin to put that in place. Those are probably all simple solutions that have are every industry starting to do, right? As most people think about answering questions, helping with emails,
Mhm.
being able to manage and organize tasks better, right?
Yeah, guest
Uh,
service is huge. For
yeah,
me, I
and
just always think about that as like, if you could have somebody that's 24/7 picking up every
bingo.
call, answering everything, like that's just a no-brainer. I mean,
And those are
I
there are
think so.
companies that have started to do that specifically for the outdoor hospitality space,
Yeah.
adding in those AI chatbots. There's now
Mhm.
AI digital phone service answering, things. It's incorporated into our point of sale and our reservation software systems, right? That
I love
are with that sort of terminology and things that are in our industry. So, having an agent that works inside my reservation system that's able to give me answers and where I'm able to not have to comb through hours of reports to get those type of
Yeah.
numbers that I need. It's all of those time savings that I can focus on more high value guest skills and figure out what I need to be doing with marketing and all these other important things. So it's starting. I'd say, on the consumer side, we have to be careful, right? I
Mhm.
don't think that consumers necessarily love it as much. We as business owners love it a lot. And particularly with, I would say, just how we're exposing them to it, right? If it's truly being used as a tool that's aiding in that process and that's helping us deliver better service, well, the consumer is just going to see that we're delivering better service. But if they're feeling like they're talking to a robot and that nobody cares and whatever, especially for us,
That's
right? If I'm
definitely not
competing
good.
against the mom and pop park on
Right.
service, number one, they already likely have an advantage because it's
Yep.
probably, Betty and Bill who's
Yeah.
built the park and Betty and Bill and you've gone there for 40 years versus, we're a new company that's come in and it takes a little bit more to build that relationship. So we're already at a disadvantage there. Now, if I'm adding, um, robot, so to speak, or some sort of online thing that's just it feels very AI and like nobody
Yeah.
cares. Well, no wonder you're going to go with them. I would too. I'd probably be pissed off as a consumer. So that's I think the thing that I see that we have to be careful of. But AI's I don't think slowing down anytime soon, and we're continuing to refine what is our strategy at Grayson. How are we thinking about incorporating AI into everything that we're doing in the back end, so that
Yeah.
we can truly focus on guest experience on the front end.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think there's a healthy balance, kind of like you're talking about,
hmm
right? Where it's implemented in the right circumstances that are going to aid in creating this more human connection that you
And I
have
think
with your customers and
hospitality's
guests.
been that use case that is
For sure.
most people think about it too. I remember even, Airbnb running
Yeah.
commercials for trying to do, AI campground bookings through something like Hip Camp, right? So
Hmm.
hospitality always to me has been, that area where AI can make, I think, an immediate impact that we
Yeah.
see it in, let's say, pharmaceuticals or law or some of these other things that might be harder to wrap your head around. Or Matt, even your space, right? It's a little bit
Yeah.
harder to think about like robotic building modular units than it is to think about, well, helping me answer reservation queries,
Right.
right? Like that's a little bit of a
Yeah.
smaller lift there. So I think people are definitely going to see it and become used to it more in
For sure.
hospitality. So that's maybe a little bit more of an advantage for us as people get more comfortable with it. It's going to only speed that up and speed that process up.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think you guys are definitely poised as a capital group moving into this space and, you know, having that infrastructure in place already to be some of the early adopters with these technologies and push the boundaries and find out what works and what doesn't and adjust. I mean, everything's going to be kind of a game of iteration, I think, with this. So
Right.
absolutely.
Well
What
said.
are you look Thank you. What are you looking forward to, both, for this individual location where you are right now and, the continued expansion?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, I think this year looking forward to I took over at this property partway through the end of last year. So for me, this will be my first full off season and into this season at this property itself. Our ownership group has been here for several years, and like I said, we have a really great foundation. But um, you know, uh, not to sound selfish, but this will be a little bit of like my imprint on the business more, right?
Cool.
Having the full 6 month season to be able to refine some of these things. And I think just dial in the operations and make these type of improvements that we haven't historically been thinking about.
Hmm.
And obviously pulling from my years of campground operations experience, it is beginning to make those, I think, industry leading type of changes that not many people are doing right now. And I think that's where we really
Yeah.
have the advantage. So I'm excited to see the fruits of those results this season and obviously have that full year here. Moving forward, I'm excited to see just kind of what markets we get into, where the expansion goes, how the industry continues to grow. Everybody knows coming out of COVID, the camping industry was booming. You
Yeah.
couldn't travel really anywhere else. It was so hard to do anything, but being outside was considered good and healthy. And when you couldn't go on a cruise, you couldn't go on an airline, you couldn't go in a hotel, people flooded to camping. And
Yeah.
we had a great couple of years. Since then, it has kind of come back down to normalization, where we had, as I said, a bit of a flat year last year, going from 24 to 25, just 1% growth, right? That's nothing. So I'm excited to see where the industry moves, how that unit mix continues to shake out, what kind of parks continue to develop. I'm seeing a lot more people moving to the model that we are in, resort style parks with higher end amenities, things for people to do. And I think that split and that gap between the parks that are really nice and those resorts and the parks that, like a state park, not really much amenities, pretty bare bones, just being out in nature, but getting a cheap stay. I think that delta and that gap is only going to
Mhm.
continue to widen.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see how the response of that is in the industry, what some of the major players continue to do there, what the acquisitions news is like. It's been kind of a crazy last month in terms of how market activity has moved and what buying and selling has looked like. So I'm just excited to see how that all pans out.
Me too. Yeah. And I think that gap, that you're talking about, it's another macro trend where we're seeing this, almost in any industry, but particularly in real estate. Just how can we make
Yes.
something as cheap as possible, as mass market as possible, and then the ultra high end and luxury market, and those are kind of the two sides, for better or worse. But will be really interesting to see how that plays out in the camping space, RV, modular space, everything. Um, Maybe the last thing to touch on here really quickly is also your podcast. I know that you're a
Yeah.
host. You got the setup. Would love to love to hear what you guys are up to and tell us a little bit more about your show.
Yeah, so I host a outdoor hospitality podcast called Outdoor Hospitality Weekly. As I said, it's with another guy, Matt Whittemore, who is a campground owner himself. I kind of approach things from more of that operational background, and obviously the work that I'm doing on site, boots on the ground with the work we do at Greyson.
Mhm.
He's involved and has been a real estate acquisitions guy. Like I said, campground owner, outdoor hospitality. He has a lot of really cool short-term rental property type
Cool.
accommodations as well. So it's a really, I think, unique perspective and take on the industry, looking at it from both perspectives. We publish weekly. We do a lot of interview content just like this, talking about market trends and activities and all of that kinds of things. So yeah, would love if anybody who's interested in outdoor hospitality, unique stay kind of spaces, glamping, RV, campgrounds. We talk about all that kind of fun stuff. So find it on YouTube, anywhere you get a podcast, and listen. And like I said, we publish every week. So I appreciate you allowing me to promote that there, Matt.
Hey, of course. Yeah, no, I'm happy to shout it out as well. Any sort of links that we throw in and around this post. So yeah, I think it's great. More people that are in the space talking about what's happening, sharing ideas. It's just a rising tide that lifts all ships. So happy to do so. Awesome. Yeah, and let me know. Is there anything else you want to share with the folks listening to this about what you guys are up to?
Yeah, I'll just add this as kind of a final closing note. As we've talked about, outdoor hospitality is and I think will continue to be kind of a major trend, especially in the real estate space moving forward. We see hotel companies like Marriott, Hilton developing great partnerships with companies like AutoCamp or launching their Outset in collection. So when you see some of the bigger names getting into the space, it's becoming real. And I think if you're in that real estate side of the space, this is definitely something that I would consider and take a look at. Of course, this is coming from somebody who's worked in the space my whole working life. So take that recommendation as you will. But if anybody who wants to, like I said, connect on the show or reach out to me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email or anything, I'm always happy to answer questions and dive in and want to try and be a force for good in the industry. So yeah, reach out anytime.
Awesome. I love it. Yep. I'll make sure to send the links as well in the post and make sure people can contact you. But thanks again, Alex. It was really awesome to have you on the show. And I hope we can do another episode here in the future when we see where you guys have expanded to and all the great things you're doing at Greece. Um,
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Again, this has been Future Built with Matt Boney, your host, and Alex Burkett from Greyson Capital.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks.